Welcome to the Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan,
Here.
Director Coleman,
Present.
Director Linney,
Here.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Patterson will be here shortly. Director Young,
Here.
President Katz.
Here. Public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration, also at this time. Madam Secretary, are there any hands online for public comment?
I have one hand online for public comment. And give me one moment, let me just get to my mics.
One in the audience.
And one in the audience, okay. Lana Coleman, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Thank you. And I apologize, I'm quite nervous. My voice is shaky, but I think that's understandable for those of you who heard how I was treated at the last board meeting. My statement's 3 minutes and 20 seconds. I am here solely to reinforce the need for your investigation to be fair, transparent, and thorough. I wrote to the members of the ad hoc committee asking to be notified and consulted regarding a proposed scope statement and the proposed process for identifying impartial investigators, but I did not get the courtesy of a response. Let me be transparent, since that is what I expect of you. I have heard from district employees who warn that the investigative processes at the district are not impartial or fair. I'm sure you do not want to add credibility to that claim. Rather, this is an opportunity for the board to prove that you are interested in uncovering the truth and correcting wrongdoing. Will an ad hoc committee report to the board regularly like other committees in the afternoon board meeting? I expect that it will. Will the ad hoc committee share its proposed scope with the board and with me for input? I expect that it should. Will the ad hoc committee include all of my allegations in its scope? I certainly expect that it must. Are you going to try and hide the investigation under the cover of confidential human resources? I expect not. Bill, Director Patterson, I want to politely correct information that you stated at the last board meeting I attended. You indicated the court had ruled on this and that was all done. What are we talking about? The court case appeal is by me about whether I am entitled to retirement benefits based on reciprocity because I retired based on the promise made twice by 2 retirement experts at EBMUD. On the other hand, Bill, this investigation is not about that, but all the internal mistakes EBMUD made. Broken promise, multiple examples of misinformation and negligence that caused a court case which could have been avoided. If these internal mistakes and this misinformation aren't identified and corrected through the investigation, the experience could, heaven forbid, happen to someone else employed here. I will fiercely argue that the collective mistakes and misinformation are confirmed and addressed so this never, ever happens to anyone ever again. Doug, Director Linney, the same is true of you. Your hostile questioning of me was about the fairness of reciprocity and how much it's fair to pay John given his state service. My retirement benefit is the subject of the legal appeal, not John's and not the investigation. I hope you can set your clear bias against the existence of reciprocity aside and focus on the investigation, which is to identify all that EBMUD did wrong and to make sure it's corrected. This needs to happen regardless of this court case or any other. Marguerite, Director Young, I wish so much you'd been here to hear the episode, as did all the staff who listened. I believe it was Andy, President Katz, who said they were trying to have a dialogue with me, but I'm pretty sure that isn't allowed in this setting. To close, as you go into closed session, I hope that the expectation for fair, transparent, and thorough investigation will be made clear. Employees here are watching to see what you do regarding my allegations, which private citizen John Coleman has also publicly stated are all true. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers, further speakers online?
Let me get to that screen. No.
Okay. Speaker in the boardroom? I see Yvette Rivera.
Pass it down.
Yes, please. And the one without the cover is for you, Director Lenny.
Ms. Rivera, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I believe everyone has received the documents already, other than the 3 people that are getting it now because there was a committee meet. I distributed them during committee meetings. I want to thank Lana for her comments. Yeah, it was pretty assaulting what happened at the last board meeting, how Director Lenny took an opportunity to basically jump on you. And I'm glad I was there to speak up against that. I was going to cover everything I've covered this morning at the board meetings, but again, I want to just say I appreciate John Coleman focusing on accountability, requesting that from the district, Director Chan for her fight to have transparency and accountability when it comes to finances. And I appreciate Cindy Sharon coming in, doing the presentation. But I do want to say one thing that you touched upon, Director Coleman, was the bonuses. You know, I got to top you. You know, you said somebody received a $12,000 bonus. The person who I've accused of discrimination just received a $17,000 bonus. So whether or not the district can address holding bonuses while investigations are pending, I hope that that's going to be something on your agenda. I want to say, so I'm going to talk about all the documents I gave you today at a different time. One of them is the EEOC document that on the back, if you look at the last 2 paragraphs, it talks about Alameda County's availability of Black people in Alameda County and Contra Costa County. Because the respondent, EBMUD, and this is a document from 1985, the McIntosh Irving case that I've talked about. The last paragraph says, even though the statistics for Alameda County and Contra Costa County are that the total availability in those areas is only 3%, I'm sorry, and the total availability in those counties are low, EBMUD has their Black employee population slightly above the availability in Contra Costa and Alameda County. But EEOC goes a step further. It says, however, these statistics do not reflect the variation in respondents' workforce. And it talks about the separation of the departments. And the document, the last page is in here, I've got to give it to you. And it talks about how many Blacks are janitors, how many Blacks are laborers, material handlers. Well, I think, you know, this is before the women's workforce was really taken into consideration. Because I can bet we have a lot of senior admins, administration staff that are just women. And I think I showed you in 2016 how the district had a placement goal of 90% in clerical. I'm gonna go ahead and end this by saying I received a public records request from Derek McDonald because he was the one who reviewed documents, and I asked for the investigators' qualifications. I don't think I received all of them, but one thing I did notice was that what was exempted was life coaches. Life coaches. Somebody is getting, not somebody, there's a list that was redacted and withheld. There's somebody providing services to EBMUD for life coaching. And that data was removed from the data that I received. I still think it's not all there, what I asked for, but I'm going to email you the screenshot of how Derek McDonald's group, I thought it was Derek McDonald himself that did the redactions.
Please wrap up your comments. Your 3 minutes have
I'm wrapping it up right
concluded.
now. I'm going to send you a screenshot. Because I can't get my arborist certificate paid for. I can't get Langolite, a parcel app for my employees. But
Thank you, Ms. Rivera.
But people at the district are getting life coaching paid
Well,
for by the district. Thank you, I yield.
If there's no other members of the public here for public comment.
I'd like to respond to that, please.
Okay, Mr. General Counsel.
The life coaching that's listed on the person's application was provided to district employees in their private capacity. As in my understanding, it was paid for by the employees themselves, and that's why that information was redacted. That is exactly what was redacted. Only names, so.
We will now convene to conference room 8 to discuss to discuss closed session agenda items. We are scheduled to return for the regular meeting at 1:15 PM. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. We will receive reports from this morning's Special Finance Administration, Planning, and Legislative Human Resources Committees, as well as reports from the July 25th, 2023 Upper McCollum River Watershed Authority and the August 25th, 2023 Special Upper McCollum River Watershed Authority under item 13. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan? Present. Director Coleman?
Yes, present, yes.
Director Lenny?
Here.
Director McIntosh?
Here.
Director Patterson is on his way. Director Young?
Here.
President Katz?
Here. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are no announcements from closed session. We have a presentation. I'll call on the general manager to announce the presentation.
Thank you, President Katz. So it's my distinct pleasure to share with you two remarkable achievements acknowledging the district's commitment to our reservist employees. Both these awards are given through the Employer Support for the Guard and Reserve, or ESGR. ESGR is the Department of Defense office that was established in 1972 to promote cooperation and understanding between reserve component service members and their civilian employers, and to assist in the resolution of conflicts arising from an employee's military commitment. Several months ago, we received the Patria Award, which recognizes the outstanding support provided by employers to their reservist employees. Each year, one small, one large, and one public sector employer are honored with this distinction in their state. We were one of those select few. The second award is the Freedom Award. The Freedom Award was instituted by the Secretary of Defense, William Perry, in 1996. This award represents the highest honor among the Department of Defense employer awards. It signifies exceptional support for those who serve in the Guard and Reserve. This year, 15 employers were chosen out of 1,863 companies nominated. Since 1996, only 325 employers have received the Freedom Award, and EBMUD is the only public water and wastewater utility to have received this honor. These achievements are not just a testament to our commitment, but also a recognition of the dedication and sacrifice made by our reserve employees. Our nomination for both these awards were made by Bob Musick, a Navy reservist and electrical technician at Pardee. Bob is with us today. Last month, Bob and I traveled to the Pentagon to accept the Freedom Award. Our recognition and the recognition of the 14 other employers this year is prominently displayed at the Pentagon. We continue to seek ways to support our reservists. Today, at the Legislative Human Resources Committee meeting, we presented and received support for further policy changes, and we will share a resolution for the full board to consider next month. At this time, I'd like to invite Bob Musick to the podium to share a few remarks.
Good afternoon, members of the board. In the time that I've been an EBMUD employee, I've been working on 15 years now. I joined the Navy Reserve as a E5. And I had some prior service, and in that time, you wonder at when you're trying to balance your family life, your job, and Navy responsibilities, where they're going to be able to balance it all. And having the continuous ardent support of the district all the way down to my supervisory and superintendent level has been a huge factor in my ability to succeed in both realms and achieve that type of balance. So going from an E5 up to Chief Petty Officer and becoming a Chief Warrant Officer wouldn't have happened if I didn't have the continuous support of the district over those years. So this award is for everyone in this room, all you board members, for everybody in that chain of command. If it hadn't been for your guys' policies, then I wouldn't be able to do that and make it very easy for me to nominate the company over several years for these increasing levels of awards. So I was really happy to hear that you guys got selected, and We had this really great experience, me and Clifford, when we went there and to see that presentation, and it was without a doubt a very impactful and meaningful award presentation. So I just wanted to say thank you for your continued support for me. So, and my statement on this placard, it sums it up of, you know, how your guys' support helped me for when I get called so that I can be the leader I need to be for my sailors. So thank you very much. So, we want to hold them both at the same time? Yes. All right.
Thank you for your service and thank you for nominating the district for this honor.
It's pretty cool.
Thank you again, Bob.
Could you share with us briefly the experience you guys had?
Well, I can, and Bob, please feel free to join in, but, you know, we came in and then we had to, of course, get the security screening before you go into the Pentagon, which is always interesting. But then we had an escorted police escort, or Pentagon police escort from the hotel to the Pentagon. And then at the award ceremony, I think there were several general, there was the Force
Master Chief.
Force Master Chief, thank you. The Secretary of Defense supporting the employees, as well as a few other people who made presentations. It was really a special moment. And then we got to do something that's not something that's done often, but, you know, we got a tour of the Pentagon. And they brought us to the hallway, the main hallway corridor where all the awardees are presented. So it is a very, like I said, prominently displayed for the next year. You know, East Bay MUD, along with the other 14 employers who received this honor, and it was very special. Bob, feel free to share your experience.
Yeah, I was really honored to see the Force Master Chief Hunt be present for that, and in talking with him, because he's Master Chief and I came from the Chief's Mess. That's how it works. So it was good for me to see him, and then talking with him, like, he actually was one of the individuals that was part of the board that graded all these the 1,800 packages. So like he was a thumbs up, thumbs down on us being selected, and he works closely with Vice Admiral Mustin, who is the Chief of the Naval Reserves. So it was either going to be him or the Master Chief that was going to show up, because Navy was represented there. So, I mean, I've met Admiral Mustin before, and he's a great guy, but the Master Chief, it was great that he was there. It was exciting to have him there.
And maybe just because I didn't understand the Force Master Chief, maybe explain to the board, you know, like how significant that role position, that person is, the Force Master Chief.
Well, he's the top enlisted member in all of the Navy Reserve. So in the active component, there's the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. In the reserves, there's the Force Master Chief of the Navy Reserve. So he is the top enlisted advisor in the Navy Reserve.
And a police escort to boot.
Pentagon Police.
How many reservists do we have serving at East Bay MUD right now?
Well, we discussed that this morning. You know, that is not something that we actually track. That you know, talking to HR, that's something we will track going forward. We track the veteran status of
Right.
employees, but we don't track the reservists. But, you know, the policy that the committee discussed is to, you know, one of the things that was impressed me meeting with everyone is, you know, the National Guard get called in at any moment for an emergency. And in the past, what we've done is we would come to the board to pass a resolution to extend the benefits to the reservists. Well, in that interim, the employees are wondering, am I going to get the pay? Am I going to get the medical benefits for my family? And, you know, and what we can do as an employer is to take that piece of stress away from them. And what the committee actually, I really appreciate, went even farther than what I had recommended, which was, you know, if there's a state or national emergency, to extend those benefits. But what the committee recommended was If a reservist gets called for any reason, and if it extends beyond the 30 days that we have covered, that our policy will kick in. So very much appreciate the feedback from the committee to go even further than I had recommended. So I think this is all because of, say, Bob, and bringing this to our attention, so.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, because it is, it's already enough stress to know you're going to get pulled out of your comfort zone and put into some situation that you don't know what's going to be the outcome of that. To know that East Bay MUD got your back and that your family's going to be taken care of while you go downrange is a huge stress relief for anybody that would be in that situation. So I can corroborate what you said right there.
And thank you for your service and all the other reservists, sir.
You're welcome. Thanks for being Americans worth serving.
We'll move now to public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments online?
We have one hand for public comment. Lana Coleman, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, your 3 minutes
Yes.
start now.
Risha, the feedback, that I'm getting on this end, again, this afternoon is really quite strong. Do you have that there, hearing my voice repeat?
Not yet.
Okay, well, yeah, all I want to say, the best I can tell is it happens when microphones are on and it goes away if everybody has their microphone off. And I'll be glad to start now.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Not yet, okay?
No, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I apologize, this is partially repetitive of my comments before your closed session meeting. It's important to me that the employees attending or listening to this meeting hear my message too. I am here solely to reinforce the need for your investigation to be fair, transparent, and thorough. Let me be transparent since that's what I expect of you. I'm here because I've heard from district employees who warn that the investigation processes here are not impartial or fair. I'm sure you do not want to add credibility to that claim. Rather, this is an opportunity for the board to prove that you are interested in uncovering the truth and correcting wrongdoing. My expectation is that ad hoc committee will report to the board regularly like the other committees. My next expectation is that the ad hoc committee will share its proposed scope with the full board and with me for concurrence. My third expectation is that the ad hoc committee will include all of my allegations in its scope. And lastly, an expectation that the investigation findings will not be hidden by any personnel confidentiality. For any who indicate the court had ruled on this, then that's all over. Let me just clarify. There is a court appeal by me alone about my portion of the retirement and whether that should be based on reciprocity because it was promised twice by 2 retirement experts and I made irreversible financial decisions based on retirement experts' promises. On the other hand, this investigation is about all the internal mistakes, broken promise, missing documentation, multiple examples of negligence. If these mistakes are not identified and corrected, this experience could, heaven forbid, happen to someone else here. I will fiercely argue that these collective mistakes and misinformation are confirmed and addressed so that this never happens to anybody again. The amount of retirement to be paid and whether reciprocity is good or bad policy is outside the scope. The investigation shouldn't cover this at all. I hope any who are biased against reciprocity can set that aside and focus on identification of all that East Bay MUD did wrong and to make sure it's corrected. In your closed session, I hope the expectation for a fair, transparent, and thorough investigation was made clear and agreed upon by all. Employees here are watching to see what you do regarding my allegations, which private citizen John Coleman has also publicly stated are true. I know none of us want me to be back here after the investigation concludes with concerns that it was not fair, thorough, or transparent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Coleman. Are there any other speakers online?
Yes, I have one additional hand for public comment. Give me one moment. Believe that's George Cleveland.
It is.
Yes, you have 3 minutes and it starts now.
Well, it's kind of more of a procedural question because I was listening earlier to the Ledge HR committee and there was a wonderful report given. And I was wondering if that report on, HR, where they want to be with their 5-year plan, is that going to be presented to the board in full, or is it just going to be kind of mentioned briefly as part of the summary of the committee reports that's on the agenda today?
The strategic plan report in Ledge HR was just on the Ledge HR committee agenda, and the HR director will be bringing back an additional report to a later committee meeting and also to the board.
Oh, okay. In that case, I just want to touch briefly on it, a question. As I said, I saw part of the report being in the union leadership because I am the chief steward, at least for another 2 weeks of local 2019. And, they were talking about, investigations and how they're conducted. And I was curious because I'm just wondering if things have changed. Because the way that the investigations, people do things, or alleged to have done things that go against district procedures and policies. It happens. And there have to get to the bottom of it. And they have, fact-finding investigations. And primarily they're done, the person will be there in the meeting with the union representative. And on the other side of the table will be the employee's supervisor, and usually another supervisor that's there to be second set of eyes, take notes, etc. And now I'm wondering if it's changed, because I think there's at least one instance where now an outside contractor is assisting the employee supervisor, and I'm just puzzled by that because it's an outside contractor, contract with district, but still, just wondering if that's something that's that new, is that part of the change? Because we heard in that report that there's going to be a lot of things that might be changed and looked at, which is a good thing, because there are some processes that are seriously outdated and need to be fixed. And I'm just wondering if that's one of them, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cleveland. Next speaker is Yvette Rivera.
I have one procedural question before I begin. Director Coleman, I know that you mentioned at one of the last meetings you wanted the minutes to reflect that some of your comments were made as a private citizen. When I looked on Friday, I didn't see that, but maybe it's changed since then. Do you know?
Reflected as me speaking as a private citizen.
Great. Okay, so many of you know I've been handing out documents today. I am going to scan those documents and send them to you to make sure all of you have them. At the planning committee, I mentioned that the district should, the same line I've given before. I hope you're planning on paying those $8 million for the Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland lawsuit against East Bay Mud, Craig Spencer and Laura Costa. I provided the board a document that was filed by the Pierce Bland attorneys opposing the district's request for a new trial. It's a pretty darn good paper. As a result, I assume that it's either going to go to the Ninth Circuit or the district's going to start paying, but I do know that interest is accruing. And it's probably, at least, I don't know, at least $1,000 or $100, I forget, but it's quite large, the amount. The other thing I wanted to mention is, Director McIntosh, you asked Cindy Sharon, or you mentioned that you'd like to see the investigation proceedings streamlined. Cindy Sharon's office doesn't do that. My understanding is that Mr. Moten's department does that, based upon the qualifications document that goes out to investigators. His department picks the investigator out of the list. They obtain all of the applications. So it is DEI that does those investigations.
Regardless of the subject or category?
DEI investigations, EEO violations, which is problematic in my case because I filed a complaint against Mr. Moten and his staff, and they're not investigating those complaints from December 2022 and June 2023. I'm going to end. I'm not going to have time to cover everything I discussed this morning, but since Director Young wasn't here last week, I hope that she had a nice vacation. I'm going to go ahead and read the couple of paragraphs that I read last week, and it was the closing argument from Bernard Alexander's trial, or the trial where Bernard Alexander spoke to Craig Spencer's, I guess, involvement in this case. I'm going to
I'll
begin.
allow an extra minute because Director
Thank you.
McIntosh had a question for you.
Well, does she want to ask first?
You already
Okay,
exchanged your-
thank you. So this is Craig Spencer, being the most sophisticated person in the room, goes the alternative route. He knows that inside the investigation process, it's confidential. And so if he puts these unsubstantiated things and he tells the investigator, it has consequences. So Mr. Spencer, the smartest person in the room, decided to feed this information to the investigator. So he told the investigator these false statements, these statements that would punish Ms. Pierce, that would poison her ability to promote. And so what he did was he told the investigator, knowing that the investigator would put it in the report and that the report would be transmitted to the board. His discriminatory and retaliatory animus transferred his words, a false statement to the investigator that gets submitted to the portal to the board members. You heard the testimony of Ms. Young, a director, as read, quote, I received it in my portal and I read it. And all the directors are expected, they are supposed to read it. So I assume the other directors read it. She said before that date she had the utmost respect for Ms. Pierce, but after that, suddenly she decided that she wasn't a team player, that she wasn't the right person. And so the consequences that Mr. Spencer had been able to poison Ms. Pierce's ability to promote upstream. Thank you for your time. I yield.
Thank you.
We have one additional hand online for public comment. I want to check and see if it's Momin Kawaja. Are you speaking on a non-agenda item or an agenda item?
I don't think it's on the agenda.
Okay.
Let me just read a few instructions for speakers. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during public comment. If we need this information, we will have you contact staff. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. Please go ahead.
And your 3 minutes will start now.
Yeah, hi, my name is Momin Khawaja. I built an AD unit in Richmond, California, and I'm contacting the board because we contacted EBMUD customer service, and they referred us to contact the board of directors for this concern. We are being asked to pay nearly $20,000 for water meter installation. We've put a lot of financial resources into this ADU unit, and we've been a resident of the county for over 25 years. We've been timely with all our taxes and paying kind of like all necessary fees and so on. We've sought flexibility from EBMUD in terms of like having credit card installations, any sort of payment flexibility, because paying $20,000 in one kind of lump sum amount is a severe financial strain for us. So we are pleading the board of directors, because we've tried many routes with EBMUD customer service, to reconsider this, reconsider the financial kind of implications of this, and pursue any sort of options in terms of changing how we pay, or kind of like seeking any sort of flexibility there, because $20,000 for water meter installation for a unit that's vacant after we kind of invested over hundreds of thousands of dollars into it is a severe financial challenge for us already. Thank you.
Vice President McIntosh, would you like to comment?
Yes. Is it Mr. Ambreen?
Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of Ambreen. She wasn't able to make it.
All right, what is your name, please?
Momin Khawaja.
All right, thank you for making your comments. I'm Lisa McIntosh. I represent Richmond and West County on the board of East Bay MUD. I've spoken to staff about this, and they've been trying to work diligently with you. And Clifford, would you sort of explain the parameters and why this specific unit cost that much?
Yeah, maybe I'll have Andrew go to the specifics about this project and maybe share some of the flexibility that he's looking into that the customer is asking for.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, as you know, the staff doesn't have the authority to really freely interpret what the SCC is and the installation requirements for each of the meter that is required for the ADUs. So we do have some parameters in terms of how we determine that. It's based on what the water demand, is for each unit, and can the existing meter handle that added demand. In this situation, the existing lot has an existing 2 units already existing on the premises, and then the applicant is adding another unit onto as a 3rd unit by basically expanding the existing garage by doubling the size to make it into a 900+ square feet unit. So we are assessing that fee based on what the board has authorized in terms of what we would charge for a multifamily unit as an added new unit. There is a separate cost component to it because the existing meter there right now cannot handle 3 households, basically. There's an existing 3/4-inch lateral right now, which is kind of the smallest lateral you could have in our system. So we do have to increase that by replacing the existing lateral to support all 3 units. In terms of credit card payment that the applicant mentioned, we're looking into that. Obviously, based on the type of transaction EBMUD does with the new development side, there's not a lot of demand for credit card payment given the size of the SCC and installation costs, but we are looking into it. There is a fee associated with using credit cards for payments in that amount, so we do have to make sure the applicant's aware of that. But we are looking to it as an added element to help them get that payment into the system.
Yeah, I would think we would be trying to assist in every way we can. I mean, literally, a 458 square foot garage into a 941 square foot ADU. And so just the current water meter is not the appropriate size.
Well, yeah, the way that it's structured right now at the existing premises is that they only have 2 meters serving the 2 units. So it's expanding, by adding another unit. So it is, under the regulations, we are required that new additional meters support the new housing unit.
So, Andrew, have we looked at just all other possibilities?
I have. I personally look into this project myself. I look at the design, I look at the existing laterals in terms of can it support another by just basically instead of adding a brand new lateral, can we use the existing lateral to support the added unit? Unfortunately, based on what the new water demand is, we cannot. Imagine 3 households potentially living in the same premise, pulling water simultaneously from one small lateral. It's gonna be some service impact.
All right. And
So, yeah, we're looking into not, also into the future and what the occupancy is gonna be.
so this total cost would be approximately $18,000.
18,000, and like I said, I will look into how to, make credit card payment as an option for the customer, but although they do have to pay the full amount before EBMUD can go out there and install the meter.
All right, so how would that work then? If they'd have to pay the full amount, so they'd pay the full amount on a credit card? I mean, how does that whole transaction play out?
So how it's gonna work out is that we may have to use our existing vendor to kind of help us set up a one-time option for this. So they do have to pay a charge. The credit card vendor is gonna have to levy on the $18,000. I believe is around 3%. So that's a 3% cost that I cannot pass on to the existing customers.
Sure.
Are we able to comment? Sorry.
We're gonna, yes, I was gonna call on you as soon as staff completed their comments.
I have a question.
Well, let me finish.
We are limited to a brief response here, so I think what's appropriate is to just allow Vice President McIntosh to complete the brief response and to make sure that our Director of Customer Service is able to be in communication with the member of the public.
So just to wrap this up, Andrew, they'd have to pay the entire amount on this credit card, plus a vendor charge.
Correct. If they choose to use the credit card as a form of payment, they can issue a check, they can issue, they can, arrange for wire transfer. There's some options out there, but if, credit card's the only option, they do have to make all the payment and plus the credit card vendor fee in order for us to install that meter.
I just want to say credit card is not we're not really chasing or pursuing credit card. I know there's a brief response, so I'll be short. We're really just chasing a reduction, and the credit card reference was more so like if we can divide it into installments, if anything. I mean, it's not a commercial unit. It's a small residential unit, and I think $20,000 is just a very large charge. It will be quite challenging for us to pay that, and the unit is vacant because of this. So.
Question by Director Coleman.
I would just caution the board against discussing this amongst yourselves. The Brown Act allows for Director McIntosh to solicit information from Andrew, but once you get into discussing the item, then.
Well, I have a question for Andrew that's related to this.
Okay.
How much is a SEC charge for a single-family home in Region 1, SEC Region 1?
I should have the number right off my head. I believe is about, I don't know, $16,000 or so. I
16,000?
believe so. Let me, I think Jack is checking for me for the exact number.
Okay, and what about for a multifamily?
Multifamily for that size is about $9,000, I believe.
And this maybe will go to our legislative side. I know the governor has a slew of ADU bills that are now on his desk to sign or to veto, whatever. Are any of them dealing with hookups, whether it be water, power, or anything else?
I'm not aware of any that addresses that.
Okay, just to get back to your question,
Yeah.
Director Coleman. Region 1, single-family homes, $13,280. And then for a resident, for a multifamily unit that is above 500 square feet is $8,390. This is the new rate that the board have adopted a couple years back.
So why is he looking at $18,000 charge when it would be,
Installation cost for the new lateral. That adds about $10,000 to the cost because that's cost that to send our crews out there for permit fees, digging up the street, replacing pavements on the street. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it, and also the new meter that comes along with that.
And new 1-inch.
Correct.
but a meter itself isn't that expensive?
The meter is not expensive, but digging a trench in the street, getting the permit, all that stuff is very expensive.
So just the installation of the 1-inch, John, is $10,400, and then the multifamily SCC, $8,390, for a total of $18,873. Well, let me just urge you to please keep working with the customer. I
Absolutely.
mean, it is a large chunk of money to just have to.
Could I just ask that we agendize the topic again? I know we've talked about it a number of times in terms of ADU, supporting ADUs, and the cost that we're seeing, I think, is averaging around $20,000. I'm hearing them over and over again, that it adds up to about 20 grand. Some jurisdictions require sprinklers, et cetera. So I think it's worth revisiting and putting on the agenda if we can.
I can do that.
How about a
committee.
planning?
Yeah, planning, I think.
We could do that.
We're in the middle of public comment. Thank you for coming to us to speak. And is there any contact information that needs to be exchanged to make sure that you can reach each other?
I can provide.
You have the contact?
Yeah, I think they can probably contact, I do have Ambreen's email and phone number, so we can make that connection directly.
Excellent.
Yeah, and please, Andrew, reach out again and make sure you guys connect.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does that conclude all of public comment today? We move to the consent calendar. Are there any comments from the public on the consent calendar?
I'd like to actually remove an item.
Okay, first I was calling for comments from the public, just to see if there are any. We will hear them after we see what's being pulled.
I have no hands online for public comment. Do I have public comment in the audience?
Ms. Rivera, what number?
Can you come to the mic, please, so we can hear you? Thank you.
This morning, there was a presentation put on hold, and it's supposed to happen this afternoon. I'd like to comment after that presentation is done.
Yeah, I have your speaker card for that
right,
item.
great.
I don't think that that's on the
Oh.
consent calendar, though.
No, we're doing that on Ledge HR at our next meeting.
All right, thank you. Then I don't have any comments, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no public comment for the consent calendar, I'll ask for board member requests to remove items from the consent
I
calendar.
just want to remove the minutes from consent.
Okay.
And I'd like to remove item 7A specifically.
But not 7B?
Well, they go hand in hand, but 7A is what I have the questions
Okay,
on.
so we'll just remove 7 and
Okay.
discuss 7A. All right. Is there a motion to approve items 2 through 6 and 8 and 9?
So moved.
Moved by Vice President McIntosh, seconded by Director Patterson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Item number 1, the minutes.
I'm just, since I wasn't here, I'm not able to vote on the minutes. So just has a separate vote.
Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion to approve them?
I'll move.
Second.
Moved by Director Lenny, seconded by Director Chan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Aye, or abstain.
Thank you, Director
Whatever
Young.
the right thing
I
is to say.
The motion carries. Item number 7. Director
Thank you. I'm
Coleman.
trying to get to my page here. I know it's page 39. I just have a question on 7A. The increase on aggregate amount is to be increased by 2 million total from 2 million, $1.3 million increase. Why is it such a huge increase? It just says increase the amount of aggregate by 2 million. Why is it so large?
Dave, would you like to respond to, or maybe Gina, sorry.
Good afternoon, my name is Gina Jenkins, and I'm the Manager of Maintenance Support. And what we've been trying to do, and we do appreciate the board approving the 4 additional positions as part of our concrete crew pilot. However, with the infrastructure in the district, we continue to have challenges repairing basic meter boxes as well as repairs due to emergency main repairs as well as pipeline maintenance. And the cost, which is the same as everything, the cost of living, is additional cost for us to pay contractors to do those repairs. We also are committed to trying to be more responsive to our community and customers so that we can reduce our backlog and get to those larger jobs as quickly as possible. So we're using the contractors primarily for some of the larger jobs, and we use district staff for some of the jobs that require 1 and 2 crews.
Okay, but that's a huge increase. This was approved back in June, the 2 million. Now we're looking at 3.3 million. I don't understand, is it because we're using contractors on the outside? Is it for materials?
It's the materials, it's the equipment, it's the setup, it's the overall size of the job. It's a combination of all of those things.
It just seems like a very large increase. I don't want to hold up what we need to do to repair. I know we need to do repairs.
I agree, but our commitment to improving the infrastructure and again, responding to the customers' complaints and the constituents when there are considerable damage after a emergency main break or pipeline replacement job, it's, the cost of doing business in the Bay Area, unfortunately.
Okay, so where's this money coming from in the budget?
It's coming from capital projects primarily.
Okay, it's from what we'll be talking about later on, the capital improvement program.
And Gina, maybe also, this is also to extend for another year as well.
That's correct.
So this, it is from it's to 2024, September 12th. Previously it was what was the time frame for the for the 2 million?
It's annually as well.
Okay, it just seems huge, that's all.
I agree. It's quite an expense.
But, yeah.
Sorry, this is Dave here. Director Coleman, I think I went back and I looked at several years of these expenditures, and it's been relatively flat over the past 3 or 4 years in that 1.8 to 2 million a year. So this latest increase is relatively consistent with what we've been spending every year for a while.
So why wasn't it in the budget?
These expenditures are in the budget.
No, I thought you said it's consistent with the 1.2 or the one, where the heck is it?
So periodically, we come back to the board roughly on an annual basis to either issue a new contract or add money to an existing contract. And the expenditure rate for concrete services has been relatively flat
Right.
for several years.
Until this year.
No, I think this year it's still been I mean, I can probably follow up maybe more formally, or Gina and I can both do that, where we can show that the expenditure rate for the last several years has been relatively flat with the contracted out services.
Well, if you can bring it back, I'm not gonna hold up the item, but if you can bring it back to the finance committee to explain it to me better, please, that would be great. And thank you, Gina, for your explanation. I'll move the item.
Moved by Director Coleman, seconded by Director Patterson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, the motion carries. We move to determination and discussion, item number 10.
We'll let Derek introduce this item.
Yes, thank you. President Katz and members of the Board of Directors, I'm pleased to recommend for your consideration and appointment Ms. Patricia Bonhayo as an Assistant Attorney in the Office of General Counsel. Ms. Bonhayo graduated from Stanford University with departmental honors and received her JD with honors from the University of Chicago Law School. If appointed, she will be joining the Office of General Counsel's litigation team. She began her career as a judicial clerk for the U.S. District Court, Northern District in San Francisco. In the private sector, she's held a position of senior counsel specializing in environmental litigation and regulatory actions, contractual disputes, business torts, employment disputes, and unfair competition claims. Most recently, Ms. Bonhayo has practiced law as a partner at a local law firm handling a wide variety of litigation in federal and state courts, including litigation on behalf of public entities. Ms. Bonhayo's 26 years of litigation experience, including experience in representing California public agencies, make her an excellent candidate for the position of Attorney 3, and we look forward to having her join the Office of General Counsel, subject to your approval. Yes.
Where was she, what private firms was she with?
Would you like to answer the question as to the firm?
I'm currently at Goodman, Newman, and Hamilton, LLP in San Francisco.
And you didn't go to Berkeley with Stanford?
Yes.
Good school. It's a good school still.
It's so. We have a healthy competition between the two.
Thank you for answering your question. I'll move the item.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, the motion carries. Your congratulations on joining the district.
Welcome.
Please feel free to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, and I very much look forward to the opportunity to serve the district.
A lawyer,
Thank you.
short and sweet.
That's unusual.
All right, we move to item 11, capital improvement program management.
Yes, so recently there's been some questions about why and the authority that staff have to move appropriations within our capital improvement program. The next presentation is on our CIP management, including a discussion on how we manage our appropriations and cash flows. Some recent large transfers were made to support the Orinda and Upper San Leandro water treatment plant upgrades. Combined, these two projects are about $500 million. These projects were approved by the board, and the authority to transfer appropriations was given to staff by the board when they approved the fiscal year 24 and 25 budget this past June. We have Sophia Skoda, our Director of Finance, and Jimmy Yoloye, our Director of Engineering and Construction, who will provide more information on the capital budget transfer process, and also some plan changes to improve visibility to the board on these transfers. Sophia.
It's not up. Good afternoon, Board of Directors. I wanted to say at the outset that this presentation has been developed to address questions around the district's management of our capital improvement program management practices. And I think it's going to be a good opportunity, and I'm sure everyone in the room will learn something.
Sophia?
So I'm here today as the.
Sophia,
Yes?
give us one moment. We
Sure.
need to make sure that we're sharing on Zoom.
Okay, I apologize.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm here today as the finance director, representing the almost 90 people in the finance department who support management of the district's finances, including the district's capital improvement program through tracking and reporting, monitoring, and other wide-ranging functions to ensure that we're good stewards of our ratepayers' funds. I'll also be joined today by Jimmy Yoloye, who is the Director of Engineering and Construction, whose team manages the bulk of those capital improvement programs. So in the discussion, we felt it was best for both of us to kind of share the pieces that we work with. So today, we are going to be zooming in on one of the many things that we do when it comes to how we manage our capital appropriations. We're going to start off by discussing appropriations versus cash flow. We'll dive into how our CIP is developed and the mechanics, once it's developed, how it's managed on a day-to-day basis through the fiscal year after the board has approved the biennial budget. We'll also go over transfers and how those work, and specifically, we're going to get into Orinda and Upper San Leandro. Those are under the award level water treatment plant, so we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about the status of our federal funding for Upper San Leandro. And lastly, we'll cover appropriations and visibility of CIP transfers. Thank you. So the first piece of this presentation talks about appropriations versus cash flow. So those words probably sound familiar to many in the room, and you'll hear them a lot today. And this table provides kind of a breakdown of the differences between the two of them, and this sets us up for the larger discussion about how we manage the CIP. So one thing to note as we start is that the approval in the budget resolution is tied to the appropriations, and then rates separately are driven by the cash flow. So they each have their own separate kind of purpose. So the appropriations are the authorized funding for awards in the CIP. And an award in kind of district parlance, we use it two different ways. So there's awards in the budget process, which are a series of projects that together accomplish an overall goal. So it might be pipeline rebuild, or it might be water treatment plants. But we also talk about contract awards. And so we might award a contract to OVRA, for example, for a specific construction project. So this is award with the capital A when we talk about budget, and then award with a small a when we talk about contract awards. So when we look at cash flows, we look at a kind of a 5-year projection of what we're going to be looking at under an award. And those inform what we ask for in the budget appropriation. The cash flows aren't approved by the board, the appropriation is approved by the board. So when we look again at purpose, the appropriations purpose is to set legal authority for CIP expenses by staff, and then the cash flow allows us to plan for rates. So we don't want to burden rates more than we have to for ratepayers, but we want to make sure that we have appropriations to be able to give a contract award and to allow a contract and a project to proceed. So we don't want to burden rates, and so that's cash flow, but we want to make sure that we have sufficient money, since we don't know before we go out to bid, et cetera, and as we do our work exactly how much something is going to cost. And so again, on the appropriation side, we're approving those every 2 years as part of the biennial budget, and we'll get into some of the details, and I'll actually show you kind of the piece from the reso that gives authority to staff to manage that. And then the cash flow is updated every 2 years for 5 years at a minimum, or longer if needed for internal planning. So the approval for the appropriations is by the board, and then the cash flow, what the board approves is the rate increases. And so the cash flow feeds into the rate model. And then in terms of tracking, staff cannot spend more than what the total appropriations are without coming back to the board for authorization. And on a cash flow basis, that may be higher or lower than we think it's going to be, but the bottom line is that the rates are set, for a 2-year period unless we come back to the board, of course. So as we jump into the CIP development piece, this shows the 4 pieces, if we're going to break it up. In the first slide, part of the slide, you'll see October generally is the month in which, during a budget development year, that staff holds an infrastructure workshop. And so that's the sort of long meeting where staff shares all of the infrastructure needs of the district and tries to weigh the risks of the different competing projects and receives input from the board. In terms of developing that infrastructure workshop, all of that is informed by master plans and studies, which include discussions of critical risks. So that's the piece that happened last October, because we just set rates now and approved a budget in June. So once that infrastructure workshop is completed, staff then takes the feedback from the board and develops a draft CIP with specific projects. And there are generally a lot of alternative packages that are developed, because you might imagine they're going to be informed by, well, gosh, you know, what's actually feasible from a rate and debt perspective. How much debt can we actually issue, given our long-term financial stability goals? What's realistic? And eventually that draft CIP is voted on by what's called the Capital Steering Committee. And so that includes, while you know, there may be 20 people that might be part of the overall Capital Steering Committee meeting, the voting members at the end of the several-month period would be, you know, the Director of Engineering, Director of Water and Natural Resources, you know, Director of Finance, Director of Wastewater. So that's sort of the team that sort of says, okay, we've heard all of the different risks, and this is kind of the final package that we feel ready to include in the budget workshops. So during this last rate cycle, we had 2 budget workshops. The first was in January, and the second was in March. We have 2 to 3 generally. And the board at that workshop reviews and provides feedback on the different rate scenarios, which includes the CIP package that was developed prior to the budget board workshops. And then at the end of that, based on feedback again from the board, we update the budget proposal, and then we move forward with the Proposition 218 notice on the rate side and send that out to the public. And then the biennial budget is generally adopted in June. There was one year when we adopted the budget in June, and the rates ended up being adopted in July. That was some years ago, you'll remember, but that's generally the schedule there. So the board then considers the biennial budget and CIP at the end of this period in June generally. And so this is just a cover of the capital, which is volume 2. So that's all the award summaries. So that has, you know, as I said, the water treatment plants or the pipeline rebuild. And the CIP includes, again, the appropriations for the specific awards. And I'm going to show you some clips of what that might look like as we move forward. In fact, they might be on Jimmy's slides, but they are part of the presentation. And these appropriations, again, approved in that 2-year cycle, but the cash flows that we show are projected 5 years out, even though it's just a 2-year budget, because we just need the appropriations to be able to let the contracts and move forward. So then after that, every contract, and depending on the type of service, either $80,000 or $100,000 has to come to the board. So no contract can move forward that's, you know, over that threshold unless it's been approved directly by the board of directors. And so we generally do that, for example, after we go out to bid, if it's a project that's being done by an external contractor. I did want to note, of course, that district forces are also supported by our capital improvement program and paid through capital projects, and some of that's supported by our debt program as well. Yes.
Can I ask you to repeat what you were saying about appropriations approved in 2-year cycles, but the cash flow is projected 5 years out?
Yes. So essentially, you know, I wonder if I move to the next slide. I'll say it once more, and then there'll be the next 2 slides that might also help clarify. So the capital improvement program and that budget book with the award summaries and the budget resolution contains essentially the appropriations that are going to be required to fund the specific awards. So I'm trying to think if I have a copy here. In my binder. Yeah, I have a copy of the budget resolution, and probably people on the screen won't be able to see it, but it shows in section 2, it has, you know, operating budget, debt service, and then the capital budget. And so that capital budget number is the appropriations number, not the cash flow number. And so again, the board approves in the reso the 2-year appropriations. And all of the projects that are under the awards are contained in that volume 2, which this is just the cover of, but it has all of the backing in there for the at an award level, not at a project level, because it would be a much bigger document, as you might imagine. So now I'm going to move to the next slide, and hopefully this will start getting more into the details of Director Chan's question. So again, big picture, this is just sort of breaking down what I've said, but hopefully in a more visual way. Board approves the CIP, then the projects are initiated, and on large projects, the board's updated on timelines and costs. So the board has received updates on Orinda and Upper San Leandro, but there are many smaller projects that the board may not ever receive a direct update on, just because of the timing. There's only one planning committee that's held per month, and there are a lot of projects. And again, the board, however, does approve every single contract that's over those thresholds, depending on the type of contract. And staff cannot go over the contract amount by more than 10% without coming back to the board. So as you know, every once in a while, staff does come back and say, you know what, we thought this wasn't enough in the contract amount, but it isn't. We have to ask you for additional funding for this contractor. So then staff then manages the timelines and appropriations for those contracts. And so that includes, one, ensuring sufficient appropriations are available to meet contractual obligations before the board approves it. And so there's a line there on the BD1, the board document 1 that comes to the board. And if there aren't sufficient appropriations, we essentially, the board has said to staff, you've got to live within your budget. We've given you a budget for 2 years, and so you manage your budget. So if you need to initiate an appropriation transfer, if there are insufficient funds, then you need to figure out how you're going to do that. We don't want to go back and open up the budget if we don't have to. People have to live within their budgets. And so that is where this transfer sort of ends up. And again, this is repeated every year. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jimmy, who's going to go over an exact example, and hopefully this will clarify further for Director Chan. And Jimmy and I are switching back a little bit, back and forth, depending on the slides, in terms of who we think is best suited. And we know that's a little different. We usually only have one person up, or only one and then another one, but you're going to see us back and forth a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Sophia. So I am going to run through a process illustration just to really hopefully help clarify how the process works. So on the screen, you see two projects. And this is basically, if you kind of imagine this as our CIP. It only has two projects or 2 awards in it. But I want to use this as an illustration of how the process works. So here we have 2 projects, a pumping plant project and a reservoir project. The pumping plant project, both of these were approved in the 2-year period for the FY24 and 25 fiscal years. So that's the example. The pumping plant costs about $30 million. So the appropriation for that project is $30 million. We expect to spend that $30 million over a couple of years for the planning, design, and construction of that work. The reservoir is $25 million, and we expect to spend that money over a couple of years for the planning, design, and construction. So in this CIP example, we have 2 projects totaling $55 million, and they'll be completed over a 3-year period. So we start working on the pumping plant project because that's the first one we work on. And as we're working on the development of that project, before we go out to a contractor for bids, we estimate what the total cost is going to be. And at that time, as we're developing it, we find, this project is going to cost more, or we actually get the bids in, and it costs more. And in this case, it's $2 million higher than we originally anticipated. So what do? Well, we have one other project in the CIP. It's the reservoir project. And so at that time, we will look at that project and make an assessment as to whether there are funds available in that. And how would we do that? We would look and see, could we reduce the scope of the reservoir project? Has something changed since we made the appropriations? Is there some way that there is money available in that reservoir project to cover what we have? And in this example, there is. So when in that situation, we then make a transfer of appropriations from the reservoir project to the pumping plant project so that we can then proceed with the pumping plant project. If we didn't make the transfer, we would not have sufficient funds to proceed with awarding a contract and actually building the project.
Jimmy, if I could get some further clarification, what's the circumstances under which you might be able to take money from one project to another? You gave a couple kind of quick examples. I've always assumed, or I've kind of heard, oh, well, we're extending the timeline for this project. But if you've let a contract for both of them, you can't really extend the timeline, or can you? Can you ask the contractor, hey, can you guys, go a little slower on this and so we can finish up this other project? Or how does that kind of, what are the limitations of that, and what are some examples of?
Yeah, and I do have the
okay.
factors
Well, you
later
can
on
get
in the
to that
presentation,
later
but I think to go directly to what you say, in this example here, where the transfer is being made before the contract has been awarded. So we're estimating how much is going to be needed, because when we come to the board to award the contract, we have to make sure that there is enough money to pay the contractor, to do all of the construction administration that we need to at that time. We also include in that a contingency of 10% if there are change orders. And so all of that is accounted for, and we have to have that available before we award the contract.
But if a contractor has bid a certain amount, how do you change that? I don't quite understand that still.
So during the course of a project, something could happen. There may be a differing site condition that was not accounted for during the planning and design. There may be a feature that we didn't anticipate early on that makes the project better, and so those are what we call change orders. In the overall.
Does a change order happen before or after the bidding process?
The change orders only happen after the contracts are awarded. Yes, that's why they're called a change order in the contract.
So is a change order while the project is going on then? The project may have started and then the change order is issued?
Yes, sometimes that's the only way it would happen. You wouldn't have a change order before the contract starts. If you knew there was a change before the contract.
Well, the contract could be starting in 8 months due to what other circumstances, and then costs may have changed. So that's my question. I mean, some of the contracts approved say it's going to be months out.
Yeah.
And circumstances may have changed for a variety of reasons. So is a change order sometimes issued prior to the work beginning?
A change order is only issued if there is a legitimate change to the contract. Once the contractor
That's not answering my question. My question is, if a contract has been approved, and let's say it's months out for whatever reason, and we decide we need to do a change order, going to what Doug was asking, is it happens sometimes before the work begins?
If you're asking, I mean, if it's months out, and when you say a change happens, it depends on what caused the change. If it's caused by the contractor owns that change. If it's caused by us, where we say, we want you to delay this project, and they had bid on it based on a certain schedule, there would certainly be back and forth between Jimmy's team on whether that change legitimately results in a change order. But assuming that we agree that that change increased the cost, then we would own that, and that's what happens with these types of changes.
Because I know it's not uncommon for us to see our projects go over the amount of what we looked at doing. And I mean, last night I gave a presentation to the Pleasant Hill City Council, and CCWD Director John Berg was there. He did a great job. Their big 5 or 6 projects, not only were they on time, they're all under budget. We don't see that too often. We have a few, but not often.
I might, Jimmy, you might speak to that. I mean, I think, again, we rarely on our capital projects that I've seen come back to the board because we've exceeded our change order limit. And, you know, we have many projects and, you know, there's a report on change orders. There aren't that many change orders on the projects that we have.
So we receive information on the change orders?
We
Go ahead.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, when we put together the projects for and the contracts for award, as part of the overall budget, we have what we call a change order contingency. So which is in the policies and procedures. That change order contingency is 10%. So if we are within that 10% contingency, staff can negotiate those amounts with the contractor. If the change orders exceed 10% of the contract, we have to come back to the board to notify the board that the change order contingency is exceeded. And for the vast majority of our projects, we are within that change order contingency.
Thank you.
Okay. So going back to the example, I was talking about the transfer and appropriations from the reservoir project to the pumping plant project. And that all happens before the contract is awarded. So the pumping plant project's awarded and it's proceeding. Now we come to the reservoir project where we've made an assessment prior that we can probably live with $2 million less in that. So in this example, that actually turns out to be true. We finish the planning and design for the reservoir project. We do all the analysis to make sure that we have enough funds available. And yes, we can do this for $23 million instead of the $25 million. In which case, at that point, we can proceed with the project. We would come to the board with the contract, having looked at all of the appropriations needed to make sure that we can complete that contract, and we would ask the board to authorize that contract for award. So everything, both the pumping plant project and the reservoir project, they're both done combined within the $55 million that had been appropriated. The appropriations are slightly different than what was anticipated when the appropriations were authorized by the board, but we're still within that budget. And so, as Sophia mentioned, we're living within our means. The cash flow is slightly adjusted because maybe things in the project changed, and instead of for the pumping plant project, instead of a 2-year duration, we figured we need to spend it over 3 years. So that's kind of the mechanics for how we look at the projects and when we transfer appropriations from one to another. Here's kind of the summary, which is what I just kind of said, $55 million over the 3-year period. There's no change in the total appropriations despite the transfers between the projects. There's no change in the total cash flow, although the timing of the expenses may have changed. So with that, this was for illustration purposes, and you probably will say, well, things never happen that way. They never happen perfectly like that. And there are other factors that can result in an increase or decrease in appropriations and cash flow. In this particular instance, if the reservoir project, for example, we thought we could do it for less than the $25 million at $23 million, if we found at the time we were ready to come for award that the bids came in higher, that was something we didn't expect. We would have the only option we would have had in this scenario with only 2 projects in our CIP, we would not have enough money to award the reservoir contract. And we would actually have to delay that by a year until we came back to the board the next budget cycle for an additional appropriation in order to do that project.
I have a question.
Yes.
So can you just tell me how exactly this is done? I mean, how do you decide which project to take money from? Is there a person who approves, oh yeah, you should, or guys, you said you should take money from this project to go to that project? I'm just wondering about the mechanics behind all of it.
So here's the next slide.
Okay.
So, here's a little bit more detail. So what are the reasons why you would transfer appropriation? So I'll talk about the left side, those are the factors, and then on the right side is the process that we actually go through. So here are listed a number of factors. So we may have some scope modifications. As we're planning, developing a project, something may come up that we didn't anticipate, or in this case, for the water treatment plant upgrades, these are, the treatment plants have a lot of facilities on them. So we may have identified a certain element of the treatment plant that needs to be upgraded, but other facilities that are part of our distribution system, not necessarily part of the treatment plant, are also located on the treatment plant sites. And so we sometimes combine those projects that may be further out in this, planned further out in the CIP and don't have appropriation yet. But in order to minimize the disruption to the operations of the treatment plant and improve our operational efficiencies, we combine those projects. That necessarily increases the amount of money that you need for those projects. It also is partly one of the second factor, which means is acceleration of a project of some improvement, and we've done that. But we also have projects that get delayed either through the development or where we purposely delay a project. In this case, we have open-cut reservoirs, and the example I'll give is Central Reservoir, which is our largest open-cut reservoir. In order to do that project and take out a large portion of the storage in our system, we need to make sure that the water treatment plants are reliable and can provide that water on a consistent basis because we have less storage available. So in this case, we did delay the open-cut reservoir projects at Central, Almond, and Leland, and move them out so that they would occur after the water treatment plant projects.
And maybe, Jimmy, we'll just pause there. And that is something, if you may recall, during the board infrastructure workshop, we shared a schedule that said this is a sequence of all the projects. And we said, but because we have to do certain projects, we shared another graphic that showed we have to shift certain projects out, including Central and some other open-cut reservoirs, because Orinda and USL, those projects had to be done before we could take Central out. And so, that's what you saw back last October. And also, even during the budget cycle, the question that was asked is, what is a risk? Because at the end of the day, this is a risk-based decision. When we decide we're going to push a project out there, we evaluate and say, are we willing as staff to accept the level of risk of delaying a project, or do we feel like we have to come back to the board and say, this risk is too big, we know it's expensive, but we have to do it. So there are components and opportunities that we do share with the board.
So those first two factors usually tend to go together, and as Clifford mentioned, we assess the relative risk of doing one before the other. Cost increases and decreases, and I think that's pretty obvious on as to why you might need more appropriation on the project or have appropriation available on the project. So our large diameter pipeline projects recently we've been receiving lower bids on that. The Oakland Inner Harbor Crossing, the Wildcat Pipeline in Berkeley, and the most recent Wildcat Pipeline in El Cerrito, all of those large diameter pipeline projects came in lower than we expected. So appropriations are available in that area to be used somewhere else. Conversely, the labor and supply chain issues, particularly during the pandemic, have significantly impacted the costs for the more complex projects like water treatment plants and pumping plants that have mechanical and electrical components and those sorts of things. So those costs have generally increased. The last factor that could come up is we may have an unanticipated project, something that we never even planned for, And a good example of this is the Moraga Creek flood and erosion control. Everybody remembers the slide of Augusta Drive in Moraga. That project, we ended up having to fix the slide. That was not planned for. So that was one where appropriations were needed for that project. We did get grant funding for that project also, but that grant funding came, was obtained kind of on a reimbursement basis. So the money came after the project was already underway. So those are kind of some of the factors that contribute to appropriation transfers. How do we actually make the transfers? So when a situation arises where a project manager looks and sees, hey, we do need to have a transfer here. There's an assessment made of how much is required for the particular project that's receiving it, and also how much is available in other projects where maybe projects has been delayed, or whether costs have come in lower than where funds would be available. Those projects are identified. Those projects with available appropriations are identified, and projects where the funds are not expected to be spent before the next budget cycle. That's where the funding is available.
Jimmy?
Yes.
Just to help sort of clarify on the process, I'm guessing that the amount available number, that appropriate, that's sort of a real-time tracking thing. Yes. You're on a regular basis, we're doing really much better than we thought on the large pipeline appropriations. That's a chunk of money that's, that we know is available. It's not like you have to scope out where those available appropriations are as you learn of the unexpected in another area. Is that accurate? It's like you're keeping track on a regular basis where things are coming in under anticipated amounts.
Yes, I mean, it's a combination of things. We are keeping track of how much appropriation is available in each of for each of the projects that we have in the CIP, but we're also kind of assessing where we might need additional appropriation on the projects as we're developing them. So there are some projects that are haven't been started. They have the appropriation, but they haven't been started, or they're delayed for some reason, and we're looking at both of those. We're keeping track of them, but when we have a need, we look at them in a lot more detail and make sure, okay, what are we seeing here? Are we missing something? Maybe a project is being developed and it looks like money is available, but it's not really available because that project is proceeding. We have to look at all of those situations to figure that out. But once we do, then we have a mechanism, a form for transferring between projects. Those appropriation transfers have to be approved by the department director, so it would be me or one of the other directors, depending on where the project resides. And then any appropriation transfers that are greater than $2.5 million have to be approved by the general manager. We have to report those to the general manager. And then subsequently, at the end of each fiscal year, a report of all of the transfers that have been made from one project to another. There's a report that is provided to the general manager by the finance department that covers all of those appropriation transfers.
And maybe for clarity, it's reported, anything over $2.5 million is reported to me because, I don't need to be another step to slow down the process for staff to get projects done. And maybe also as an example, as we're preparing the budget and determining the amount of appropriations, Jimmy, when we know that we're going to delay certain projects like open cuts, and we know we're going to be moving forward with projects like USL or Orinda, we don't go to the board in the budget cycle and saying, please give us more appropriations for USL and Orinda, when we know that certain projects have been delayed and we can move appropriations around within the existing budget.
Yeah, and when I get to the detail on USL, you will see some of that.
Question is, Clifford, along those lines, so if we're moving money around over 2.5 million, which you need to, it's reported to you, it's from within the project or different projects?
It's, they move it across what we call the awards. So when you look at the capital budget book, and I mean, I know these are our terminology, but on the cover of the book, it says award summary. So when you go through the volume 2, you'll see all the awards. So example that Sophia was talking about, treatment plant upgrades. That is an award. But under treatment plant upgrades includes USL, Arinda, Sobrante, all of our treatment plants. But what Jimmy would move is money between awards. So he might move something from the open cut award to the treatment plant award. Did I get that right, Sophia?
And I have a question about the 2.5 million. So I'm just kind of curious about the why 2.5 million? Why 2.5 million? I think that there are other agencies that allow transfers, but the money that they're allowed to transfer is a lot less than 2.5 million. So why 2.5 million? What's the story there?
I think this all happened before any of us were in
Sophia, we can't hear you if.
Yeah, so I mean, this is, the prior general manager, Alex Coate, the directors could move, any amount of money to, and again, within the authority provided by the board, staff would move money appropriations around to make sure that we can complete the projects that the board approved. And my understanding with Alex Coate, the prior general manager, is, that's good, but I'd like to know when larger dollar amounts are moved. And it was an email notification from the directors to the general manager saying, we move this money around, and at the end of the year, all of that summarized in a memo that says, here's all the money that was moved around between awards. And it was more for him, awareness for him of the money appropriations being moved around.
Okay,
And so the $2.5 million, as far as like how they land $2.5 million, I don't know how you picked that number, but that was the number that was selected.
Okay, and I mean, I'm just wondering, as you look across the different government agencies in the Bay Area, if that is an exceptionally high number. I don't know, but it seems to me that that is a high number. And I'm just wondering if it is largely out of range of what the norm is.
If you look at our overall capital budget, if you look at the 5-year CIP between water and wastewater, you're approaching $3 billion. So it's not that big. I mean, again, we're not trying to, we want staff to have the authority to do their jobs. The authority that's given to Sophia and staff is that anything you move around has to be within the authority granted by the board. That is, it has to be something in the capital improvement program that was approved by the board. It can't be for some special project that we dreamt up without getting authorization from the board. And so, if you lower that threshold, we're trying to balance the how much you want to slow down and create the paperwork. Is still going to be approved by staff. I mean, viewed by staff and summarized by staff. But that's how we manage it.
Yeah, I was simply raising the question.
So I need to tee off on that question. So we find out about it as board members, at the end of the year in the summary on the transfers?
So,
That is one of our recommendations, is to the memo that's provided to me and the senior management team on the appropriation transfer. One of the recommendations, and again, when we get to the end of the presentation, is we would share that with the board. So you'll see the appropriations that were moved.
Okay. We approve the appropriations, and whether it's 2 million or 500,000, if it's within the CIP budget, great. And if there's an understanding why we need to do it, great. But we're approving the budget specifically on certain projects. And I think the board should approve those transfers of that amount. We're the ones who are putting our skin and our name on it, and to have other people transferring it around just doesn't seem appropriate. Just because we've done it in the past doesn't make it right.
The projects that we move forward with, are the projects that we have shared with the board, that these are the projects we plan to do, especially the large projects that we plan to do in the next 2 years. And then you see the cash flows for the next 5 years, which, as Sophia shared, is what the rates are based on. The appropriations is a mechanism for us to make sure those, the funding is there to do the projects. There is not a project that we move forward with that, as Sophia mentioned, for the 80, 100,000, that the board doesn't approve. And the projects that we do move forward with and the schedule of those projects is shared with you at the infrastructure workshop, in budget workshop number 1, in budget workshop number 2, and then there are those out-year projects. And we all know that those out-year projects can change for a variety of reasons. But those next 2 years are pretty solid, and those are the projects that we would be moving forward with.
And I understand there can be a mitigating circumstances why money has to be emergencies, things of that nature, like we had down by the Oakland Coliseum. And in terms of having to fix the pipes and everything else. I'm just saying, I guess I would like to know versus 3 times in a year, what's being transferred. And if it's appropriate, if it's over a certain amount, you know, if we approved 4 million for this project and 4 million or 2 million of the 4 million is being moved to another project, we should vote on it.
I see a couple hands here, Marguerite.
One step that seems like it's been left out as well is, that does happen every month, is that the planning committee gets reports on every major capital project that's going on and where it's at and whether it's ahead, behind, upside down, inside out, you know, et cetera, which is another, you know, sort of step in the, you know, the board's understanding of the projects. I, for one, you know, I think having the information is quite helpful, but I'm not, I mean, Sophia's got a team of 90 people that are, you know, managing this. Jimmy's got folks that are managing it, and every other SMT head is on top of these projects. I don't want another meeting every month or another 15 items on our consent calendar about all of the work that we're moving ahead in order to keep things on track. At some point, you know, we vest, you know, our general manager and our finance director to, and you know, Jimmy and the rest to manage the capital improvement projects, which we approve and do our due diligence on in the infrastructure workshop and the budget approvals, and the fact that we do approve every single contract above a certain amount. You know, more information, you know, fine if we want it more than, you know, if folks want it more than once a year, but I do not want to start micromanaging the ability of our very capable senior managers of having what they need in order to keep our projects on schedule, because that ends up costing us actual money if we're behind and delayed. So I'm not understanding the, you know, when I have a budget at home that I make up every year, I can tell you every month it's different than what I thought it was going to be. And I move things from, you know, food to clothing, from health insurance to this or that every month to try to make sure that I'm sticking within the budget that I have for, you know, my family. I view this as being very, very similar to that, with a much more capable bunch of people doing it than I am. So I'm just really not, I know I missed the discussion, you know, that happened over the last few weeks on this, but I'm not quite getting it.
I'm not trying to slow it down, Marguerite. I'm just trying to have some accountability. I know we have very adequate staff. I know that. We have a large staff. I know that. But if we're making decisions where to put money on specific projects and it's being transferred from one project to the other, we should know it. Now, maybe one way to help is in the finance committee this morning, I asked for an Excel spreadsheet, which is going to be created for audit tracking. Pretty simple. It can be done for this too, and provided to the board on a monthly basis. So we see what's going on. It's a matter of, we're accountable. We voted on it. Therefore, we should know about it and not find out maybe once, twice, or 3 times in a year.
So I'm with Marguerite on this, but I'm not disagreeing with what you just said, John. You know, having the information and the transparency, I think, is a good thing. Having to approve those transfers of things, I'm not wanting to go there at all. When I vote for the capital improvement budget after all the workshops and everything, I'm voting for the direction that the staff is saying we need to put more money into our wastewater treatment plant or into our pipeline repair or things like that. I'm not looking at every item and how much is in there, that there's, you know, $14.7 million for X project, and now it's going to be, you know, $14.2 million because they have to change things around. You know, that's not what I'm voting for. I'm voting for these projects over this period of time, keep them moving along unless something changes that says this project is no longer that important or this project is more important than we thought, and move those things along and let us know what those transfers are. Again, I think that transparency part is just fine, but I draw the line at trying to have a vote for those transfers.
I'm not trying to micromanage, Doug. You know, we don't, yes, if we read every committee report, I'd have planning finance, what you deal with. Generally, I don't read the entire reports. I don't think anybody reads all the reports of committees they're not on. It's just like the budget. We had extensive items to review this morning. So Sophie asking the question again, what I provided to you on the Excel sheet, can that be done for transfers?
I haven't received it yet from the Secretary's office,
Well,
so
okay, I have a copy here, so it's here for you. And it can be adjusted so that we know what's happening and when, and simple, get it monthly.
Yeah, and
I would like to just note that we do have some recommendations from staff about how to improve the process and improve communications with the board.
But this is different.
We see that at slides 16 and 17, so I just want to kind of round up this round of questions and make sure that we can move through the presentation.
Okay, and I am the one, I think, who brought this forward, and I have to tell you that this isn't about $2 million transfers, even though that's what we've heard about. This is about, well, if you look at one of the slides number 12, 2019, there was a $30 million transfer. 2020 was $40 million. 2020 was $8 million. 2022 is $29 million. 2023 jumps up to $275.9 million. And if my constituents are upset, it's about $279 million. That was just this huge balloon, this huge increase. I also kind of wasn't sure that everyone got this memo from our internal auditor, Mr. Gardner, but I just kind of want to read a couple paragraphs because I really think that it highlights my concern. The ability to transfer appropriations provides staff with the ability to significantly shift or increase award project appropriations outside of the board's purview or visibility. For example, in fiscal year 2023, approximately $279 million in award project appropriations transfers were made from 9 award projects to the treatment plant upgrades awards. These transfers were made to cover costs for the construction phase of the USL Reliability Improvement Project, increase the total appropriations from $690 to $969 million without board approval. So that is, we're not talking about $2 million at that point. We're talking about almost $300 million. And then he lists it, basically where the money came from, but the ability to transfer funds between awards after appropriations have been authorized limits the board's visibility of the capital project and restricts the ability to provide level oversight necessary to ensure expenditures are made in accordance with the rationale provided when requesting appropriations. And so I'm just gonna say one other point to that. We do need board visibility, especially when you're talking about that amount of money. But I think what's really concerning here is public transparency. If you can move $279 million and not tell the board and not tell the public and not tell my constituents, we're doing a huge disservice to our constituents. And I really don't feel, okay, last thing, I know that the staff feels that they have appropriations transfer authority, but we do not have the right to be moving this type of money without public visibility. And so that's.
I think we have some ideas that I think will, I think hopefully meet the board's, I think what everyone is looking for. So if the board wishes, I can continue with the slides. So this is the budget resolution appropriation transfer authority that Director Chan was just speaking to. So if you kind of go in the middle where the ... is, this is section 7 of the budget resolution. Department directors and department managers are authorized with approval of the Office of Budget and Performance to transfer unexpected appropriations to other approved capital projects, provided that the total budget remains unchanged. So that's been the way that this has been done, and then an annual report of the transfer capital is submitted to the general manager. But there are ways that I think we can increase.
This is in the budget resolution
That's correct.
each year? Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
So in June, when you approve the budget,
Yeah.
this is in the resolution.
Yes, so this one was approved 13th of June 2023, the one that we have currently with the new name of the Office of Budget and Performance. So this is the current authority. But as Director Chan said, we serve at the pleasure of the board, and I think that there are ways that we can continue to enhance transparency and visibility.
And Sophia, I know you're going to go into the details of the actual transfers, but I just want to clarify just, a couple of things. As far as, besides giving us the staff the authority to move appropriations, the projects themselves, forget where the money is and how we make it all work. The board approves, the projects that we move forward with. The board hears about the projects that we're moving forward with. This is the mechanism that we have that says, okay, we're going to make sure that the money is there to do the projects that you have approved. And that like, here's all the appropriations we moved to do the projects that you said we should move forward with. So there's not like there's a project that we say we're not moving forward with a project that you didn't already see and say we would move forward with. This is a mechanism which we just find the funding to do this to get the work done. And happy to share that level of information or whatever at the end of the day, whatever the board, if the board wants to approve every appropriation, they certainly can, but there's an impact to that type of work. What we're talking about is not, are we doing the project we said we would do? We're doing the project we said we were going to do. We're doing the projects that the board approved. What we're talking about when we talk about appropriations is a mechanism which we make sure that there's funding to do those projects that we said we're going to do without having to come back to the board and saying, you know what, you said you're going to do this project. We have appropriations here. We're short here. We're going to ask for appropriation for this project, even though we know there's appropriations here that we can use to balance the budget. And we can do that. And again, certainly that is a process we can do. And I'm not saying that there can't be improvements, but that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about not doing the projects the board has approved. We're talking about doing the projects you approved, just how do we make sure the money is in the right place?
I just don't want to make sure it doesn't look like we're providing a blank check in the process. That's how some people could perceive it, as a blank check on projects that, for whatever case, whatever reason. But I also understand how projects change, the dynamics of a project, an emergency of a project, unforeseen cost, labor cost, or material cost. I understand that. It's just when it's I'd like to see if you could draw the Excel sheet I gave you, see how you can mock it up. Again, if it's given to the board in its entirety, once a month, great, we know what's going on.
John, can we get through the rest of the presentation and then let's have a
I
discussion?
do think we have some recommendations later, so let's move forward.
Just really briefly here, these are some key capital transfers that were mentioned already by Director Chan, the $279 million to Upper San Leandro. Where that came from is going to be on slide 14, so we'll go into that detail. And then FY22, you can see the $29 million, again, referenced by Director Chan, And this came from open cut reservoirs. So that's almost exactly what Jimmy had mentioned earlier as an example. And then in the right-hand side on this chart, it just shows you the total sum. So these were the key projects to which transfers were made and the total amount in any of those given years. So that 279 was the bulk of the 346 million that was in 2023. And you can see it varies a lot because it's just being transferred such that staff can approve contracts and so on and so forth. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this back to Jimmy, who's going to get up to talk a little bit about Orinda and Upper Stanley.
So actually, on this slide, I'm actually going to skip this slide because it just covers what I've kind of mentioned earlier. I think what's more informative is, and this is probably the detail that Director Chan would like to see, is for the $279 million transfer that was made for the USL project, where did all that come from? And this is the entire list of where that came from. So the first line is the open cut reservoir program, and that's the example that I gave earlier. We did defer the Almond and Central Reservoir replacements. Those monies had already been appropriated for that job, and the reason for the deferral is what I just said, that the risks of doing Central without having reliable treatment facilities in place was something that we didn't feel was the appropriate way to go. So do the treatment plants first, have those become reliable, and then taking the reservoir out of service, our largest reservoir, is a lot less risky. So that was the bulk of the transfer. I talked about the large diameter pipeline projects. Because of the lower bids on a number of those projects, there was appropriation available in those awards to move to USL. The new service installations and the pipeline system extensions, those are elements that we are done for new applicant services. So new services or new pipelines in order to provide service to new applicants. Those appropriations are appropriated on an annual basis. We estimate how much each year. Now, if the new applicants don't materialize, that money is not used and is available. So, but each year there's money for those services. So at this point, we had the combined between the new service installations and the pipeline extensions, there was about $25 million that had been previously appropriated, but the developments never showed up at that time. And so that was available to transfer to other projects, and in this case, we did it to USL. Service lateral replacements are just that. We have we kind of install new copper laterals to a lot of residents, but we had been proposing to do that by contracting out. We had discussions with the unions. That was shown not to be the best way to approach it. And so, but because the staff was not available until the board approved those additional positions this budget cycle, that money was available to transfer to the USL project. The group of three, the pumping plant rehab projects, the building facilities, and McCalmay aqueducts, those are the projects in those awards had just naturally been delayed because of permit conditions, or the building facilities have to go to city planning commission. So those projects have just gone longer, and those funds were available. And the last one is the security improvements. It's a small amount, but there is an award for security improvements district-wide. Within that overall project award, there was a component for USL. So since we are doing all of these improvements at USL, we included the security improvements as part of the USL project, and then just transferred the component that was dedicated for USL in the security improvements award to the USL project. And that's where the $279 million came from.
And Jimmy, if I'm remembering, the USL project itself was sort of prioritized by an unanticipated, well, hoped for, but unanticipated grant that funding, federal funding that's supporting the project that we weren't necessarily expecting, which gave it a higher, like, let's get rolling with this because we've got this, this award coming from the work of our congressperson and, what I think, promoted by Vice President Harris and other things that helped. I mean, that's part of why this reallocation happened, right? Is that the project itself got, moved up in the queue. Is that,
Yes,
is that
it did
correct?
get elevated in status, and I think it was already an important project, but this just added to it the ability to get some federal funds. But that's kind of leads me right into the next slide, is that the USL project was awarded $3.5 million in the Federal Consolidated Appropriations Act. That only partially offsets the total cost of the project, but it's a significant, it's a feather in the district's cap, and being able to get federal funding for this particular project. So where we are right now with that is that we are working through the application process with the EPA. We are looking to get a waiver to the Build America, Buy America requirements, partly because this project was already developed and in place before the BABA requirements came into being. So we do not have the money right now. We don't have that money. But once it is approved by the EPA, that funding will be allocated to the project on a reimbursement basis, and it will offset some of the money that we have to spend on the project. So our project team will continue to monitor compliance with the federal requirements. There are requirements that are associated with that $3.5 million that apply to the entire project, not just whatever we're going to spend the $3.5 million on. And that may include auditing, whatever those are. The staff will continue to monitor and comply with those requirements. Yes.
I see on the screen, there's the headline for when Vice President Harris came. I happen to have that article here, but it says, the estimated cost of the project at Upper San Leandro Water Treatment Plant is $88 million. So I guess I'm kind of wondering how we got from 88 million to the 237 million.
Okay.
And maybe that's something that I can get a memo on.
I think you're about to quickly explain.
Yeah, I can quickly explain that. Obviously, when we started applying for the grant and the project estimate, it ended up being low, partly because of supply chain challenges and labor supply challenges during the pandemic. So the costs for the project did increase. But we also had, as I mentioned earlier, we combined other projects with the USL project. So it's not just the USL reliability that we had applied for the federal grant on. We had then included the chemical system safety improvements at USL, and we're doing those safety improvements at all of our different facilities. So that added to the cost. Plus, there are distribution facilities on the USL site, such as the Clearwell, that's kind of the finished product before you send it out to the distribution system, and the Oak Knoll pumping plant that are also on that site. So the work for those two projects that was kind of accelerated because we wanted to make sure that we are minimizing the impact to operations and being efficient with all of the construction on this particular site. That all helped increase the dollar amount from just the USL reliability to the project award that we.
And the changes too, I mean, we have, as Director Young has highlighted, we have come to the planning committee to share, as the project has evolved over time and the combination, so the board knows, like, this was if you go back years, this is the original project, and then we started consolidating projects within it. That is shared with the board.
So will the Oak Knoll project, pumping plant, will that be I know there's some big development plans for Oak Knoll. Will that be SCC money back into us to help cover these costs?
No, it is called the Oak Knoll Pumping Plant. It's not necessarily related
Not
to
at
the
the
Oak Knoll
site?
development.
Not
It's
related
on
to the
it's on
site at all?
USL
Okay.
treatment plant site.
Director Patterson?
Yes, I just wanted to say, regarding USL, the reason we're getting this 3.5 million is because we had a project ready to go, and environmental justice under EPA was looking for projects, and I had input into that session. I've been following USL all the way through. I was there Saturday with the community, letting them know about operations beginning to take place with construction. I don't know where some of this is coming from, but it's been on our books, and we've all been following and looking at it. The Finance Committee, everybody knows about our capital improvement program, and the staff has worked very hard to make these happen. The reason why we're going to get additional federal funding is because we got projects that they're looking for that service many of the areas of environmental justice, like East Oakland. That whole area in there is served by this. USL serves a wide range of people all the way across territory that I used to run when I was in the city. It used to be a park, and 580, when it came through and cut it in two, we got reservoirs on the other side, USL over here. If you're not paying attention to the things that are connected in your ward and know about them, we certainly do, and we certainly are keeping track of it. And if the Finance Committee isn't reading their material and seeing some of these things as they happen, this is why we have a staff. This is why we're out front. And this is why we're being selected for money from outside. And I think they're doing a good job of moving it. If you want closer contact with it, give us a recommendation, and we'll see if we can implement it, if you have concerns about it. But please, give us something to work with that staff can work with. They're finding things that they can't finish without additional money. And some of that money comes from outside and some comes from inside from the already approved projects. And we do get accountability annually. We get accountability. And you can get accountability next week if you have a question. All you have to do is raise it. Clifton can get us that. I don't have a problem with some of the things that are being talked about. And if you're not out there and seeing this and able to talk to people about it at NAACP meetings and other places, I tell them the work we're doing. And I tell them the impact of the people that we're serving. And somehow this gets heard at higher levels. Our reputation is not small, and it has never been bad. We are on the front runner of every water agency in the United States. And I just want to keep saying, let us work together as a board. And if you want to control everything, come down here and sit in your office every day and look over somebody's shoulder, and you can see all the projects you want to see. I just want to make sure if you're coming through the committee and the board is asking for something to be brought to their attention, let's do it the right way. And we can facilitate that. We can get you any information you want. You spell it out, we'll find a way to get it to you. But we don't have to approve every little thing that the body does. And they have to be free to move these projects that we've approved. Otherwise, you're going to be in a stalemate and the projects won't happen.
So we have two more slides left that have really substantial proposals for some modest solutions to deal with the concerns. So let's just move on to those.
See all this stuff.
I'll try to be brief. So, we do think it's important for, as kind of the budget and finance office, for our engineering and operations and maintenance partners to stay within appropriations. We think that's important, and we think it's important that they make choices within the appropriations that they have based on risk. So we do think that it encourages resourceful management, and we know that we do come back if contracts are over that 10% threshold that we had discussed. And also there are often amendments that we come back with if there's an amendment to the debt budget or an unforeseen circumstances Director Coleman had mentioned earlier. So we don't think that what we should be doing is requesting budget amendments more frequently, but we do understand that the board would like more CIP visibility, and we have some ideas. So certainly, we think that providing the same report that's provided to the general manager to the board, would be a very, very easy and simple way. So that's kind of at a basic level. And then there's a bunch of other places we can go to. We're looking for opportunities to enhance capital budget management, but some that we can discuss today if there's interest, get some direction. One, we could come to the board and bring information notification about the 2.5 million. So any of those that are approved by Clifford, for example, that could be it, or if it's a different number, that's also a possibility. So there could be notification of those larger ones. It could be notification of all transfers. That could also be a piece of information provided. Another opportunity would be that the GM would have to approve all transfers between awards. So currently, the GM's only approving over 2.5 million. You could delegate that you would like the general manager to approve all transfers within awards. That would be another level. And then, of course, there's the option at the end, which is that the board would approve all transfers within awards. So there's kind of a range there, and we're happy to take direction based on the board's discussion. And if there's additional information that the board would like from staff before decisions are made on that, we are happy to put together.
And maybe just quickly, just for clarity again, I do not approve the appropriations transfers over 2.5 million is reported to me, because again, that would just insert
Sorry,
one more
I
step in
apologize,
that process.
the word.
I get an annual report on the appropriations transfer, which, again, it seems appropriate because we do the budget cycle and then the mid-year cycle, and you can see on an annual basis as you're looking at the budget where all the appropriations are going. I think on a monthly basis, that's a level of detail that is hard to reconcile with the overall budget, so.
We did have Vice President McIntosh interested in speaking earlier, who hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll recognize Director Linney and then Director Young, and we'll take the stack after that.
Well, it sounds like we've received the information that we needed to receive today, and it sounds like we're not that far apart. I agree with Marguerite, Bill, Doug, that, I don't want to have to make these decisions on an ongoing basis. That's why we have staff. However, I agree with April and John, because we should have a record of this information. And I think you gave Sophia a spreadsheet of some sort. Why not provide this board with the relevant information on even a quarterly basis, or, even sooner, if that's what the board would like? So, we've got to the last slide, and this last slide actually provides a solution that I think would address everyone's concerns. So I move this. So let's put it in the form of a motion. We want staff to continue doing what they're doing, or at least I want staff to continue doing what they're doing, but I'd like to have a record of what they are doing.
It's not for a decision, though.
I'm sorry?
Today's not for a decision.
Well, I'm trying to sort of
Got it.
wrap this up.
We can always revisit this at a later workshop, but we've received a lot of information and we have
And
some
staff needs a
recommendations.
direction as well. So I say, let's have a report, even if it's quarterly or monthly, if that's what others want. Staff continues to do what they're doing. Well, that's where I am.
Can I say, I don't disagree with Lisa. I agree with Lisa, but I'm really more interested in that third point, that staff continues to work with internal auditor on best practices. And the fact of the matter is that we've asked the public to entrust us with a lot of money, 2.8 billion for infrastructure. And so this report, which I don't know if everyone got, frankly. I don't know if everyone got it, but I think that there still needs to be a discussion about our internal controls with the auditing. And so I'm going to ask, because I promised I would ask you, Director Patterson, can we discuss this at a Finance and Administration meeting? The internal controls that we need in place to ensure public transparency. Thank you. Okay.
Put it on the agenda.
Thank you.
And the memo was,
Thank you.
Copy of that.
and the memo was shared with all the board members. I'll resend it to all the board members. No, it was separate, but I'll resend it to all the board members.
So I have a question and a comment. Sophia, in this recommendation, how often is quarterly, right, that the report goes to the?
No, per the budget resolution, it just goes once a year, but
Once a year.
we can provide it more frequently. That's
Okay, so I think that's the key thing that we have to determine on this. Otherwise, I'm hearing agreement on that.
Before we come to agreement, I do want to make sure that we take the speaker card that we have, so.
Okay, I haven't made my comment yet.
Right.
I'm trying to conjure up what it was again. I'll let Marguerite go, but please come back to me, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine for, transparency and, reporting the information on whatever schedule doesn't impede the ability to get the work done. One thought that came to me is that since, our general manager is getting reports on appropriations above 2.5 million, maybe that could just simply be added as another component of the report that he transmits to us on a monthly basis as a part of the board agenda. And that's, that would be relatively easy to do and would highlight the things that he's decided, or that, the senior management team and the capital improvement steering committee have decided through some criteria is a threshold that, is important to bring to his attention, and therefore, perhaps important to bring to our attention. So that might be an easy thing to just put in.
Okay, so
right away.
for now, then, we'll go ahead and add that to the monthly report, those over 2.5 million, and we also will provide the same report that goes to the general manager on an annual basis, and then this item also, internal controls is going to be discussed at Finance Admin.
So is this going to also include the Excel spreadsheet or something thereof?
So so the spreadsheet on audit tracking, I
be dealt
received it,
with
and
on
I just
this,
wanted to
yeah.
apologize. I didn't go during the lunch break to the Secretary's office to get this, so I just want to apologize
No,
to
that's
Risha
fine.
and also to you.
Not a problem.
And I'm sure that we can come up with something that's a tracking mechanism and include it in the report that looks something like this. I'm sure.
And I guess what we're suggesting, Director Coleman, is the report that I would get annually, you would get annually as well. That's already on a tabular format. And then we'll also include anything over $2.5 million in the GM monthly report. So you'll see the $2.5 million appropriation transfers in the monthly report as well. And then you'll see the overall summary annually.
And so we have a proposal that's still somewhat in progress. I think this is an appropriate time to take public comment. Yvette Rivera?
Thank you. This morning, I passed along the San Leandro Times article titled Director Chan questions East Bay MUD's transfer of funds. I really have to commend the board members that are being persistent in the face of people telling you, we don't need any more work, because I'm a ratepayer, and it's highly gross to see this nonchalant environment about, excuse me, I'm talking, so I don't need to be, thank you. This nonchalant attitude about you requesting more information. Now, when you hear that it's a 10% contingency rate that's permitted by managers, you're hearing the 2.5 million. But when I looked at that board, there were projects that were 35 million. So that means 3.5 million that managers have latitude to spend. I'm going to email you on my experience as a liaison with capital projects. I'm in charge of grounds west of the hills. And I've had a little bit of experience with working with engineering on supporting some of their projects, or them supporting our projects. So I'll be emailing that since I won't have time. So we work at East Bay MUD. I've worked at other agencies. There are strict government laws about controlling money. They're in place because it's called checks and balances, and the strict monitoring of money. When I came to the district, I heard about the embezzlement of money out of water conservation. There was an employee that was taking some kind of money from it was an embarrassment to the district. Last board meeting, a gentleman by the name of Joshua Young came to you and spoke about government waste and how unnecessary change orders increase the scope of capital projects. That's something that I brought up earlier today, and I really think that you need to look at how much money capital change orders change the original amount. I know that earlier last year, General Manager Chan came and asked for approval because there were change orders, and I know that from what I recall, the justification was that, other water agencies, it's kind of a standard thing, it happens. Well, this district needs to look at other government agencies in the state of California because we're talking about ratepayer money. Anyway, again, I want to thank the board members that have been persistent in the face of people, all the board members, because it isn't just the two, in the face of others saying, we don't want more work. Thank you, I yield.
Director Liddy?
All right, I have two comments. One is that maybe there's an opportunity here to bifurcate some of the information evaluation to the Finance Committee, takes a closer look at these things, and not to the whole board. I don't know. I just want to kind of throw that out there. But as Bill said, the staff is always responsive. When we ask for more information about something we want to know about, the staff is always there with it. So this request doesn't seem all that unusual. I'm glad it has been brought to our attention, and I appreciate the staff presentation on this. I certainly learned something today, and very helpful. I always like being spoon-fed information. Sometimes in the budget workshops, this stuff has gone over, and sometimes, it's just good to have it out separately, so I like that. The other thing, though, I didn't want it to get lost that April had said earlier, this is not just about the $2.5 million reporting, but also about the larger amounts. And I want to, again, inject maybe in the conversation here, and maybe April to talk some more about that. Things, the larger amounts, the amount for Upper San Leandro Reservoir is significant. It's bigger than in past years. Maybe there's an amount that might warrant a more systematic review by the board for these transfers, so that, again, we're feeling that we're doing our fiduciary responsibility for this. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we are closing the discussion with a clear consensus. Vice President McIntosh, you were beginning a motion, should we resume that or provide informal direction?
I think, yeah, mine was after it was clarified that we did not need a motion. My statement was simply just to give staff direction from my point of view.
Director Chan?
May I suggest that we, I asked Director Patterson if we can continue this discussion and talk about internal controls within finance administration. Really should have gone there first.
Yeah, it should have.
So maybe at this point, we just talk about it in the financial administration meeting.
And then come back with a recommendation for the full board.
Sounds good.
Good. All right, thank you, everybody. I think that concludes the discussion on this item.
Thank you for the discussion. Just moving on quickly to the general manager report. Earlier this year, the board expressed interest in holding a board retreat. In the past, the board has held retreats to discuss a variety of topics. In your packet is a form with potential dates and topics for a board retreat. The board retreat has to be conducted within the service area, and we are suggesting that the retreat be held in the administration building. But if you have a suggestion for another location, please include it on the form. And we also ask that you complete the form and return it to the Secretary's office by September 15th, if possible.
Clifford, I know in the past we've,
Sorry. So I've got something about the retirees event and where to see the.
It's at the end of the regular board packet.
It's in the actual board packet that was online.
Yeah.
Oh, the online pack, okay.
Yes, if you need a copy, I can, yeah.
Clifford, in the past, we've sometimes held retreats that are in service at the Renda Watershed headquarters.
Yeah, so if you have any
San
suggestions.
Pablo as well.
Yeah, so if there are other locations that you would like to suggest, the administration building was just a recommendation because it was a little more convenient for us to put together. But if there's another location, it should be something that's open to the public so people don't feel have to pay to get in there. We want to make it fairly reasonably accessible because this is, the retreat will be open to the public. But outside, and it has to be within our service area. But outside of that, if you have some other ideas, send it our way. And then also attaches the general manager's, the monthly report, and then your speakers bureau is at your places.
Okay, are there, so we move on to the committee reports. The minutes from the August 22nd Finance Administration Committee meeting were included in the agenda materials. We will now receive updates from this morning's committee meetings and other recent UMRWA meetings. Director Patterson for Finance and Administration.
Yes, the early meeting this morning generally was a clarification, and it was much discussion about budget items, much of which you've heard during this discussion. And we're charting a path for improved monitoring. And April and I will be talking as well, so that we agendize the concerns that were expressed and have participation on the part of the full board after that. We deferred the second part of our meeting to here, and you've had that discussion already. That's really my report from the committee today.
Thanks for planning, Director Linney.
We had two items today, Walnut Creek Water Treatment Plant Pre-Treatment Project. This is a significant work done at the Walnut Creek Water Treatment Plant. We got briefed on that. And then there is public safety, and then there's dam safety. We spoke about the dam safety program annual report. District has 20 regulated district dams. A lot of good news about the inspections that we do on a monthly basis, also on an annual basis. Spillway conditions are good. I asked some questions about changing climate and how that might affect how we operate the dams in the future. And staff is going to look into that and give us some feedback and report next year.
Ledge HR, Vice President McIntosh.
We had three items on the agenda. The first was special military pay and benefits for National Guard members and military reservists for East Bay MUD employees. And Lisa Serrani, Manager of Employee Services, made that presentation. And second, the Human Resources Department provided a planning update on their strategic 5-year plan. And it was presented by Cindy Sharon, Director of Human Resources. Both of those reports were outstanding, and we had to put, because those went over long, we had to put the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan update over to our next meeting.
For July 28th, UMRWA, Director Coleman.
Yeah, thank you. On July 28th, we covered a number of items, including approving the minutes from April 28th. Treasurer's report, we had an implementation status on Phase 1 of the forest projects and the work plan funding strategy for the forest projects. And we did the fiscal 2024 budget and looked at the McCullough biomass feasibility investigation and legislative issues. They had a special meeting on the 25th that I was not able to attend since I was in bed with my knee.
Action, would you like to report on that?
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you, Bill.
You want me to do it now?
Please, yes.
Yes, the Upper McCullough River Watershed Authority met on August 25. We had a full round of representation, and we were in the Pardee Center at Valley Springs. It was a great day. It was warm, and the water was blue, and the input was great from all of the motions and passed the board meeting minutes. The Forest Project Plan Phase 1 Implementation Project was approved by motion. And as you know, the federal funds are doing our reforestation work up on the watershed. And the people were very enthusiastic. There was a good turnout. And I got a ride with a young man up there who took me, and he was so impressed at the enthusiasm that people expressed. So the second item of the agenda that was the implementation funding strategy to follow. That led us to a broad discussion, and all of the contributing members up there are highly motivated. They see grant money and they see more expansion. I raised the issue with them that because we are getting these approved, to investigate how we can move the materials that are left behind after the reforestation project is done, getting the timbers out, getting the big trees that are cut and getting them out is the most important element that they are looking at as a stumbling block. We haven't had any fires. We've removed the remedial stuff that leads to fire, but we don't want any of the trees that can't be moved. Those are the most expensive of the projects. And so they're investigating ways in which they can get that done for less money. They did have a contractor come in and have a low bid. He was awarded the contract, and they're ready to go to work. I was just enthusiastic because I enjoyed the meeting so much. John, you should have been there. I told them about your knee. And
Yeah, I don't think I could have made it. I would not have been able to make it up there, trust me.
yeah, I told them, and they all wish you well. They sent word back. Tell John to hurry up and get well and get back here.
I'm doing pretty good now, thank you.
All right, anyway, after a long meeting today, I'm very enthusiastic at the close.
All right, well, that takes us to other items for future consideration. Please submit your items for future consideration to the general manager and director comments. Thank you if you have already submitted your written comments to the secretary. Are there any verbal director comments? Director Coleman.
Not a verbal comment, I meant to ask, when Doug made his present, talked about the planning committee dealing with the Walnut Creek treatment plan, I had to go back and read it. I know in the schedule, there's a tentative meeting on October 19th in Walnut Creek about this. Is that still on the calendar?
Jimmy, do you know?
Yes, that is still on the calendar. That's the
EIR.
Yeah, the EIR required public meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any further director comments? All right, then the next regular meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, September 26, 2023 at 1:15 PM. This meeting is now adjourned.